Hi everybody, welcome back to my next video on Olympic Day, where I talk about an Olympic Games through the t-shirts that I own. I've been to every Olympic Games from Sydney 2000 up until Lausanne 2020. This year we had the Youth Olympic Games taking place in the Olympic capital. And from winter, summer to youth games, I've really been very lucky enough to see how much the world has changed over a 20-year period, and this snapshot of the Olympic Games just gives this sense of what's going on within the world. So I want to talk about games for which I don't have the t-shirt. The first games I went to, which was Sydney 2000, and for that I'm wearing my Olympic Truce t-shirt. Now, you may not have heard about the Olympic Truce, so just to recap for you, back in the ancient Olympic Games, the Olympic Truce operated whereby the regions of Greece called upon those heads of the regions to allow athletes safe passage to ancient Olympia to take part in those games. Now, that principle of safeguarding the passage of the athletes to the games remains in place today, and it was set up in the 1990s to allow athletes and to allow nations to actually take part in the games, but also commit to the idea of bringing about peace. And of course, there's a big difference between peace and truce. Agreeing to stop fighting for a few days isn't the same as agreeing to be in peace with each other. But the principle behind it was a pathway towards a more peaceful world, a place in which we can, perhaps for longer than just the 17 days of Olympic competition, all live and work together in a place without conflict. And so this Olympic Truce is a program of work that comes out of the Olympic Committee in Lausanne to encourage heads of nations to cease their conflicts for the duration of the Olympic Games. In fact, the IOC president goes to the United Nations to call upon heads of states to abide by this action. And now at every Olympic Games, there is something called a truce wall that people sign to commit to this principle. And it's really a wonderful way of thinking about what the Olympic Games is really all about, which isn't, for me, certainly simply about Olympic sports. It's not simply about medals, but it's really that coming together of nations in peaceful competition that describes what that Games is all about. And of course, it's also a place in which tensions are worked through by not just host nations and their territories, but also the international community. We saw this in Sydney as well in the 2000 Games, where many conflicts were taking place around it, not least of which was the conflict between the Australian nation state and the Aboriginal Indigenous peoples of Australia, where even the location of the major Olympic park was in a place called Homebush Bay, which was historically owned by the Indigenous people. So the Olympic Games, in my mind, has social value because it becomes a space in which tensions are worked through, sometimes not satisfactorily, it has to be said, but I think we know more of our history and its conflicts by the fact that the Olympic Games take place at all. They are always a focal point for conversations about important issues that matter. And we see this from one game to the next. I'll perhaps talk about Vancouver later on, because one of my experiences there was working in a place called the WT Centre in downtown east side of Vancouver, where there were lots of homeless communities. And again, a recurrent theme at not just the Olympic Games, but major events is how the populations of a city work together when they're trying to host the rest of the world over a 2-week period. And yeah, it's a really fascinating process and incredibly interesting for a researcher, but incredibly challenging for a citizen to get behind. And so Olympic Truce, I think, is still a concept that is incredibly appealing. But the problem is partly that there are so many competing approaches to bringing about peace that, in fact, it can be lost in the kind of tidal wave of efforts that are taking place around this. I think it is probably true to say that despite the fact that we've had Olympic Truce now for quite a number of years, there has been no Olympic Games where conflict has not been taking place concurrent with it. So it remains there as an aspiration, a hope that in fact at some point in the future we may all be able to lay down our arms and allow athletes to compete at the Olympic Games host city or host region and all enjoy and participate in that. It's for many people in the Olympic family a dream, an aspiration, but for many people also it's a really practical way of working through tensions. And you saw this also in the context of the Pyeongchang Olympic Games in 2018, where the historic conversations between North and South Korea were in the context of this idea that the Olympic Games should allow things to happen in a way that's otherwise impossible. And I think that's what people mean when they talk about the kind of the power of sport and the fact that we can sort of suspend the kind of conventions or conflicts that exist outside of that context and compete alongside each other. I think it's a wonderful idea that the Olympic Day sort of exemplifies, really. It's a way of thinking about the potential of the Olympic Games, even if the reality doesn't always get there.